Thanks for tuning in to the 7th episode of the MMA Roundtable, and the gang is all here. We got myself and Chris from the MMA Podcast, Ray and Patrick from MMA Mental, and our good friend Dave from Buffalo, and we got a bunch to talk about, as always. Of course, UFC on Fuel 6 is this Saturday, so we're going to break that down for you. A few scheduled fights, a couple failed drug tests, and we're going to talk about all of that in 1 second. Let's do it. And like I said at the top, thank you so much for tuning in. Our partners, Ray and Patrick from MMAmental.com. You can check us out, the MMApodcast.com. And one quick programming note before I pass it off to Ray and let him tell you about the guests he's going to have on this Wednesday. This is actually going to be the last Monday edition of the MMA Roundtable, barring some weird circumstance. We might do a different day come Thanksgiving, because I know a lot of you guys will be busy that Thursday along with ourselves. So starting next week, we're going to start on Thursdays, same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. But yes, our next show will be Thursday, November 15th. A little programming note there, and let me pass it off to Ray to let you guys know all about the current haps on MMAmental.com.
Okay, thank you very much for passing it off. Yeah, we've got quite a good show lined up this week. Me and Patrick have got some great guests to chat with. So we've got 3 guests lined up for this week. We've got a man who's just starting his road back into MMA after a bit of time out. We've got War Machine coming on the show. And then we've got 2 Bellator winners from last Friday. We've got Ryan Ford, and we've got the man advancing to the heavyweight Grand Prix. We've got Richard Hale. Also want to make sure we've got fight diaries coming up soon. We've got Paul the Titan Taylor and Spencer Hewitt, who's debuting at BAMA. We're going to do an audio diary with them on the build to their fight. And also MMA Mental have now set up new forums, and it's free to register. So come over to MMAmental.com and check out what we're up to.
Definitely. Really looking forward to hearing an interview with War Machine, just getting out of prison. And if by any way or happenstance War Machine's listening to this, please don't listen to the Bonehead edition of last week's Roundtable. That's all I'm going to say about that. Just for the safety of one of our Roundtable members.
Thanks for telling them where to look.
It's about an hour and a half in, I want to say, if you just want to skip ahead there. You always can listen to our podcast, the MMA Podcast. If you're listening to this live, it's on the same website, ustream.tv/channel/the MMA Podcast. Last week, we had a really great interview with Michael Chiavello. He stayed on for about 45 minutes, talked a little bit about his career, had a lot of interesting things to say about the current state of MMA. We chatted with him a little bit about TRT. We chatted with him about the current tough season, or not the current tough season, but the next tough season of Chael Sonnen and John Jones. He was very adamant that that is a ratings ploy, and it kind of cheapened the title. So if you haven't listened to that interview, definitely go and check it out. I actually have the 45-minute clip up on iTunes if you want to listen to just that and not the rest of our nonsense. And actually, this is the only roundtable we're not going to be taking callers. We had a little bit of a technical issue last Monday. We figured it out, but we're not going to have that sorted out until next Thursday. So come next Thursday, definitely call in and share your opinion with us. But if you do still want to share your opinion with us, we're on Twitter at the MMA Podcast. I have my mentions up right now, so if you tweet at us, I'll read out what you're saying. The same goes for at MMA Mental. If you aren't following either of us yet, you definitely should, and you should visit our websites, MMAmental.com and the MMApodcast.com. And before we get into MMA news, as kind of has become the custom, let's start off the podcast with a little bit of Fight Busters. We'll let you know the answers to last week and the new Fight Busters for this week. You have your Fight Busters ready, Ray?
I do. We'll start off with last week's. We put them out on this show on the MMA Mental podcast, and of course on your own podcast as well. And we also put it out on the MMA Playground as well. So here are last week's clues and the answers, and that'll give you an idea of my thinking, and that'll hopefully help you with this week's clues and answers. Okay, so last week's clues were close to being a disgrace, driving not to lose, So close to being a disgrace is shame. So close to that was Shane. Driving was car. Not to lose was win. So the answer was Shane Carwin.
Heyo.
The next one, I'm pointing in your direction. Don't kick my leg. You surprised I can drive. Wah. So I'm pointing in your direction was you. Don't kick my leg apart of the leg shin. Are you surprised? Oh, I can drive car. Wah, me. So you shouldn't car me. And the last one, which I thought was quite easy, but it took a while. I think Dave got it eventually. It took a while for anyone to get it. The clue was getting sexual with a biro. So a sexual act is, of course, BJ, and biro is another word for pen. So I thought that one was quite straightforward. But we've got 3 clues this week. I think 2 of them are quite tricky, but I think one of them is quite straightforward. Okay, so clue number one is correct, incorrect, and then kill. Okay, so correct, incorrect, and then kill. Clue number 2, I've got loads of money, I'm tough, bring on the stones. So number 2, I've got loads of money, I'm tough, bring on the stones. And the third one, steal some jewellery. So that's the 3 clues. So have you got any ideas for any of those?
I've got a couple ideas, but it's not answers. I mean, I'm kicking around stuff in my head, and you know what? I just don't have the brain to do this stuff. I said I was going to actually make an effort to try and figure it out last week. I didn't. I'm going to do it this week, dude. I want to win a goddamn t-shirt.
Okay, so if you've got the answers, you can email me, mmamental@hotmail.com, and we will read out the answers on next week's show and on my show and on Jake and Chris's show as well. So yeah, they're the 3 clues. Get your thinking hats on.
Definitely, and we will reread those a little more than halfway through the podcast before we do our Bonehead of the Week. Just in case you missed it, which I don't know how you would, but hey, just in case, we'll have Ray read those out before we do our Boneheads. So yeah, let's move on to the current week in MMA news. Kind of the biggest news coming out was the fact that Stephan Bonnar and Dave Herman failed their UFC 153 drug tests. You know, I was really rooting for Stephan Bonnar just because he seems like the consummate good guy, and he was the ultimate underdog against Anderson Silva. Now I'm kind of glad he didn't win, because if Bonnar somehow would have pulled off the upset against Anderson Silva, and then we found out he failed a drug test for boldenone, which was a metabolite resulting from usage of an anabolic steroid, I think myself, along with the whole MMA community, would have been pretty crushed. Dave Herman tested positive for a marijuana metabolite. Actually, no, I was wrong. Bonnar actually tested positive for boldenone at UFC 62. This actually was the second positive for both guys. Bonnar tested positive at UFC 62, like I just said, and he tested positive for drostanolone at UFC 153, and both of Herman's failed tests have been because of marijuana metabolites, obviously at UFC 153 in Brazil, and again before a 2011 match with Mike Russo in Texas. Because Brazil doesn't have their own governing body, the UFC is stepping in to make suspensions for both guys. Obviously, Bonnar, he's retired, so a suspension's kind of a moot point if he isn't going to be fighting again. Herman's an active fighter, so this hurts him a lot more, which kind of sucks because he only tested positive for marijuana, while Bonnar tested positive for a active metabolite in an anabolic steroid. So kind of my question to all of you is Bonnar is one of the key ex-UFC fighters who will go on the UFC broadcasts, along with Kenny Florian, Brian Stan, guys like that, and I don't know if I've seen him announce a fight, but he's always in the studio breaking things down before and after. Do you guys think the UFC should punish Stephan Bonnar, suspend him a certain time from announcing? Personally, I think just like he would receive a 6-month suspension from fighting, I think he should get a 6-month suspension from the studio. It obviously shouldn't be permanent. He really was a part of a historic fight against Forrest Griffin and is a part of the UFC's history, whether they want to kick him out or not. but I think he should be levied some sort of punishment for testing positive for Joe Stanalone.
Obviously, it's a shame that this has come about, especially with it being his last fight of his career. I don't know if we should be punished. I mean, obviously, he'll get his punishment in effect would be obviously the fighting ban, but like I said, that's not going to affect him because he's retired from fighting. But I don't necessarily think he should be punished for what he's doing outside of the fighting, because that's not what happens with other people when they get suspended. If they're suspended from fighting, they can still make money other way, and I just don't think it's fair to take that away from him. I think at the end of the day, he's done it. We all know it goes on. It goes on a lot more than what we we'd like it to. All he's really done probably wrong in effect is probably get caught out. A lot of guys do it and don't get caught out. But yeah, I think it's happened. His career's finished now. It's in the past. Just move on. That's me personally.
Yeah, he definitely needs to have some kind of repercussion. I think Jake brought up a good punishment. As far as a fan, I really don't care. You guys know my stance. So me personally, I wouldn't want anything to happen to the guy. He's out of the fight game. He's not going to come back after this, I don't think. And no wonder he tested. I mean, if you look at his pictures on, but prior to his fight with Anderson Silva, he was absolutely jacked. It was ridiculous how fucking jacked he was. I want to say he was up there with Alistair Overeem as far as just, change in body type. I mean, he's been going through it for a couple years now. So, regardless, I think, there should be some kind of repercussion. And do I think it'll actually happen? Probably not.
Dave?
I never really been a big fan of Bonner. I appreciate what he's done for the business and everything. This is the second time he's done that. And then, top it off, it was kind of hinted around that this was possibly his last fight ever before he goes off into retirement. And now he's stuck with this as his legacy for his last fight. He got caught cheating by using steroids. Not the best way to end your career. As for punishment, what could you really do to him? Jake brought up a good point in suspending him for any extra things he does with the UFC. I think that probably could happen. I would personally, if there's any fines, I would just beef up his fine a little bit since he's not going to be fighting anymore. Just makes more sense to me. You hit him where it hurts in the pocketbook and call it a day.
Yeah, this is a really tricky situation here with Stephan Bonner. And it's just such a shame because he really is a good commentator for mixed martial arts. He did some work in the WEC, I believe, doing play-by-play. And him along with Frank Mir, they're both really good. So my question is, and my issue is that if Stephan Bonner is going to continue to have this career as, almost a spokesperson or still a figurehead or a public image for the UFC, and he's going to be commentating and doing these shows, it just doesn't look good, him going out on a failed drug test, being a repeat offender in the biggest fight of his life in Brazil. Is it a situation where, he was in Brazil and, there's no athletic commission, so I'll just go ahead and juice? Or was it a kind of situation where, hey, maybe he figured out how to cycle on and off, and he's been doing it ever since UFC 62. He never stopped. And it's just a real shame that these questions kind of are brought up from that. So, like everybody said, Dave hinted on it, what can you really do besides maybe hit him with a bigger fine? Anything besides that, it's just, there's really no other option.
Definitely, it's kind of sad for both guys, kind of in different ways. Stephan Bonner, like I mentioned before, I don't know a single MMA fan who dislikes Stephan Bonner, so it's kind of bad for, like I mentioned, a consummate good guy to go out with a failed drug test, which in all likelihood this will be his last fight. And in Herman's case, you want to never like seeing a guy suspended for marijuana, and that'll kind of probably be an open and close. if the UFC's taking care of it, we'll probably see him serve a 6-month suspension and not much more come out of that. Which it always kind of seems like 90% of guys who test positive for drug tests are the losers of said fight. So, it's really kind of whatever. So we'll move on to the first edition of the World Series of Fighting, which was this past Saturday. Really, really great fights, actually. A lot of recognizable names on it. You had JZ Cavalcante beating TJ O'Brien a minute into the first round with a heel hook. Brian Cobb beat Janis Torres with a split decision. We have Tyrone Spong in there. He got a pretty nice knockout. Miguel Torres, actually, in the main card, looked really stiff, lost by a split decision, 30-27, 28-29, 29-28. I think most people thought Moraes won that fight. Miguel Torres, I don't really know what the deal has been with that. Anthony Johnson defeating DJ Lindemann via knockout in the first round. Which that was a really amazing moment. Johnson actually got poked in the eye and turned to Herb Dean and was saying, "Hey, I got poked," and Herb said, I didn't see it, and Lindemann kind of used that as an opportunity to rush in on Anthony Johnson because he was trying to talk to the referee, almost sort of like Floyd Mayweather versus Victor Ortiz when he looked over at the ref, and Floyd used that as an opportunity to rush in and finish him. But the exact opposite thing happened. Lindemann ran in, and Anthony Johnson just connected, put a right hand on the button, knocked him out cold. He was planking all the way down. And you had Andrei Arlovsky, who won via TKO over Devin Cole, landed a pretty good punch and followed that up with some brutal hammer fists. And I wanted to get your guys' opinion on what your favorite moment of the World Series of Fighting one was. Personally, I thought that was really awesome, seeing Anthony Johnson turn to a Dean, say he got poked in the eye. Lindemann runs in. Looks like Linderman's trying to take advantage of the situation. Johnson's only seeing out of one eye, and Johnson just drops him. I think Johnson should fight the rest of his fights with one eye closed because he seems to have awesome accuracy looking out of one eye. But yeah, that was my favorite moment of the fight. What about you guys?
Well, I kind of wanted to break a couple down, not as far as getting depth, but what I liked. Favorite moment, I'd have to say probably JZ Cavalcante torquing TJ O'Brien's leg with that Achilles lock. That was nasty. It was quick. And as far as the performance of the night, it's kind of a tie between Tyrone Spong and Josh Berkman, because I thought Josh Berkman had nothing for Gerald Harris, and he put on an absolute show. A real clinic, and Tyrone Spong just put it on Travis Bartlett. So I'd have to say it's those guys. A lot of people would say that Andrei Arlovsky looked dominating, but yeah, it's against Devin Cole. I mean, the guy's been convicted of rape and, just not the greatest guy out there. So it was nice seeing him put away. But yeah, those are my favorite moments.
For me, my favorite moment was probably when they fixed the technical issue in the first 5 minutes of the NBC Sports broadcast, because I thought I was going to have an epileptic seizure there. But yeah, fortunately they got that figured out. As far as the fights, I found them entertaining. I loved the Rumble knockout over DJ Lindemann. Lindemann, he's not really a slouch. He's coming down from heavyweight. And it was just a great knockout. Shades of Paul Daly, Scott Smith there. Opponent just completely, he was corpsed up. He was dropped, laying face down on the mat. It was beautiful. It was just kind of hard for me to get into just because, you look at the card. I thought some of the best matches, for example, or the most competitive matches at least, like your Gerald Harris versus Josh Berkman, those were buried on the preliminary card internet stream, and we just kind of had these mismatches designed to produce these knockouts and nice finishes, which they did. So it was good in that respect. But I don't know if I really enjoyed it, and if I think that's really what's good.
I thought I didn't actually get to watch the card, and I will watch it. But I've gone over the results.
Looks like we lost Ray momentarily.
Are you with you, Ray?
You there, Ray?
You back? Well, it looks like Ray's dropped out of the call. Dave, you want to go ahead and give your recap, and hopefully Ray can rejoin the call by the time you're finished?
Sure, no problem. I think my favorite moment would have to be the Spong knockout. Yeah, he was facing a guy 10 years his elder, not really the most known fighter out there, but just the way he knocked him out with that nice freaking shot. Then he just walked away, forgot all about that this is MMA, not kickboxing, where there was a standing 8 count. Thought it was pretty hilarious. It reminded me of when Mark Hunt knocked out Chris Tuchisher and just walked away from him because he knew he was done. I still want to say I was equally as impressed with you guys as with Josh Berkman taking it to Gerald Harris. I thought for sure Gerald Harris would just control it on the ground for 3 rounds and wrestle him to death. But Berkman came ready and prepared and proved to be the better fighter that night, and it was another good moment.
Definitely. Really enjoyed. Oh, sorry. You are back, Ray. Good. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. I just lost internet connection. But the moments that jumped out of me, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch the card. But I will watch it and I will catch up on it. But the standouts for me, I was surprised at the Josh Berkman Gerald Harris fight. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays, because that was that on paper looked pretty straightforward for Harris, I thought. I'm also looking interested to see the Tyson Steele knockout over Gregor Gracie. I was surprised Torres lost. And I had the chance to do a video conference about 5-6 weeks ago with Andrei Arlovsky when he announced his fight with Devin Cole. So I was pleased that he won. I'm looking forward to seeing that fight as well. But hopefully Arlovsky takes a step up in competition for his next fight.
Surely. One of the things just watching it that I thought was kind of peculiar, it seemed literally like 3/4 of all the commercials aired were starring a black Zillion fighter. I think I saw the Rumble commercial where he started off with the phrase, "When I was little," which I thought was really funny. I had no idea if he was talking about his childhood or his stint at welterweight. You had Michael Johnson in an ad I saw a few times barking like a dog. You had Alistair Overeem talking about killing people or annihilating people or something, and you had a Rashad Evans commercial, obviously. I was kind of curious why the ads were so Black Zillion heavy, but other than that, yeah, for the first time out, pretty well put together. One thing that was kind of curious is Michael Schiavello did the prelims and then didn't do the main card, which I personally think he and Boss are the best 2 commentators outside the UFC, so I was really kind of confused as to why they didn't keep him on for the main card. And other than that, yeah, it was a really, really awesome fight. Before we get to our Fight Busters, which Ray is going to be hosting this week, Patrick, did you have a point you wanted to make about Dave Herman getting popped for that marijuana metabolite?
Yeah, the only point I wanted to make, I'll try and keep it as concise as possible, is just that in the United States, and really to my knowledge, most countries in the world, you're taught that marijuana, if you use marijuana, it makes you stupid, it lowers your reaction time, it inhibits your coordination, and, there's just a litany of problems that are wrong with it. But yet every single athletic commission, to the international, the Olympic Committee, everybody deems marijuana a performance enhancing substance. And it's just the stupidest thing I can even think of. So you're raised your whole life and you're taught that if you smoke weed or, if you do drugs, you're a loser and that's bad. But if you use it in athletic competition, that makes you better. And so you have to strip away wins and titles and things of that effect. It's very asinine. And I think, really the entire world needs to just get their shit together and decide which one it is, if it makes you better or if it makes you worse.
Yeah,
well, it could be part of the reason, though, too. It could be part of the reason because a lot of people classify marijuana as a pain reliever. So I don't know if they're trying try to say if they're just saying that, they could almost work as like a lower tab or something where you don't feel as much pain or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
that's a good point.
Me personally, I can tell you that after working out, a really hard workout, we're talking like, let's say a 2-hour workout where it's cardio and heavy lifting. I personally myself have used marijuana for recovery, and I can tell you it really does. And it's not numbing necessarily, but you don't really think about the pain, I guess, if that makes sense. So it does have pain relieving qualities to it, whether that's like a Loratab, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you from firsthand experience that it does. So I would have to say that's the only performance enhancing aspect. If you go into a cage, a cage fight, a UFC fight high, I can't see how that would help you in any way possible.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting subject. I have heard people that say that rolling jiu-jitsu, they're with it more if they are high, but I really don't think any of these guys are fighting high. The only report that I've heard about is the Nick Diaz Takanori Gomi fight, where his levels were so high they actually think he got high before the fight. But this isn't, this isn't people necessarily getting high back in the locker room before a fight. You have people like Keith Kaiser, which Kaiser is still running his mouth. A couple of days ago, I don't know what his personal vendetta is. He's stepping way over his bounds of being an athletic commissioner, and now it's almost like, like he is in an opposing fight camp, because he is literally just talking smack, Kaiser saying, "Oh, we all know why Nick Diaz was drinking tons of water beforehand. He was trying to get marijuana out of his system." Like, A, Keith Kaiser, no shit. B, okay, even if he did smoke a week before, even if he smoked a day before, someone with a tolerance level as high as Nick Diaz, being high is only going to last maximum. Even if he gets blasted higher than giraffe pussy, you're only going to be high for 7 or 8 hours, which, 2 days before a fight, I'm sorry, but if you smoke 2 days, 10 days, whatever the case was, it's not going to affect you whatsoever. And the fact that Kaiser is pressing on guys like Nick Diaz, who I don't think anybody, including Kaiser, thinks he was high for the fight, the fact that Kaiser is trying to stick his nose in there, all of this, it is absolutely ludicrous.
No, it's Jay-Z.
It is Jay-Z. It is P. Diddy. Let's move along to guess that tweet. This week, Ray is our host, and Chris really had a heartbreaker. He went to double overtime with Dave, who was making his first appearance last week. Dave is 1 for 1, batting 1,000 with Guess That Tweet. So looks like we have MMA Mental 2, the MMA Podcast 2, and Team Buffalo Dave with 1 point. Let's see if Dave can tie it up, or Team MMA Podcast or MMA Mental can take the lead. Ray, I will pass it on to you, good buddy.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to give out the individual scores. We've got Jake on 2, Ray, Patrick and Dave on 1, and it's not worth going on. But yeah,
hey!
we've got Chris on a big fat 0.
And somebody else.
Chris to know his place.
Damn it, you guys! I just want to have fun.
Right, I've got. I know we normally do 4 tweets and a tiebreaker, but I'm just going to go straight out. I've got 5 tweets. So I'm going to do all 5 tweets regardless of whether we need it or not, and we'll see if we can get a winner.
Let's do it.
Okay? Right, tweet number 1. I guess it ain't innocent till proven guilty these days. That cop didn't have shit on me, that stuttering prick. Okay? Is it number 1, Justin Buchholz? Number 2, War Machine? Number 3, John Moraga? Number 4, Pat Barry?
Oh, man. That's, there's always the curveball in there. Gosh, I'm going to have to say War Machine. Going with the obvious.
I'll go with Buckles.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Buckles as well.
It was Buckles, War Machine, Pat Barry, and who else?
John Moraga.
Moraga. Yeah, I don't see Moraga or Barry getting arrested, and if they did, especially Barry, I think I would have heard of it. I know it seems too obvious, but I'll jump on the bandwagon with P-Money and go with War Machine.
Okay. It wasn't Pat Barry. It wasn't Justin Buchholz.
Son of a bitch.
Fuck.
It wasn't War Machine. It was Joe Moraga.
Oh, guys suck.
Right.
Probably swinging on the curveball.
No points for anybody.
Number 2. Retweet at BBC World new type of hashtag cannabis grown for medical use in Israel. It doesn't get used as stoned. Retarded. Right. Is it 1, Justin Buchholz, 2, Pat Barry, 3, Eddie Bravo, 4, War Machine?
Oh boy, I'm really gonna look like a fool if I get this one wrong. I'll go with Eddie Bravo.
Same.
Gotta go with the Bravo.
Let's make it a clean sweep. Eddie Bravo.
Right, it was not Pat Barry. It was not War Machine. It was not Eddie Bravo.
Fuck
It was Justin Buchholz.
Bitch!
Oh,
This might be the only week where I don't look like an idiot.
No, you still look like an
no,
idiot.
we all look dumb.
Oh, right. Number 3. I find your lack of pants disturbing. Hashtag Star Wars. Okay. Is it number 1, Nate Quarry? Number 2, Nick Lentz? Number 3, Darren Cruikshank? Number 4, Marcus Brimage?
Oh man, I'm trying to think of who's a big Star Wars fan out of that group. I can't really say. I'll roll the dice on Nick Lentz.
I'm thinking Nick Lentz too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I know this is not good pod at all, but I'm going Lentz. I know he's a geek. I know he likes to game a lot. And the Marcus Brimage likes Dragon Ball Z, so I'm not sure if he's a Star Wars guy. And who are the other two?
Darren Cruikshank and Nate Quarry.
Crookshank definitely doesn't watch Star Wars. You know what? I'm going to make good pod. I'm going to go with Nate Quarry. I'm going Nate Quarry on this one. I'm going to change my vote.
And
Oh.
Chris is going with Corey. I'm going to go with alumni of both of our podcasts, Darren Cruikshank. Why not?
Okay. It was not Marcus Brimage. It was not Darren Cruikshank.
Boo!
It
He's
was
in the
not.
zombies.
It was not Nick Lentz. It was
Uh-oh.
Well done, Chris.
Look out!
Right.
Fuck your
Number 4.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right, you ready?
Oh yeah.
Laugh Out Loud at War Machine has hashtag beef, or in his case, I would say hashtag tweef. Dude acts hard, but he is as soft as a marshmallow. Hashtag real talk. Hashtag team real deal. Hashtag GDUP.
Jesus Christ.
Is that number 1, Lyman Good? Number 2, Paul Daly? Number 3, Ryan Ford? Number 4, Brian Baker?
Oh man, gosh, that is a very tough one. So many douchey hashtags. I'll go with fuck. You know what? Let me get those. Let me get the fighters again, Ray.
Right, these are all Bellator welterweights. You've got Lyman Good, Paul Daly, Ryan Ford, or Brian Baker.
Ooh, you know what? Just based on the vernacular and the region of the hashtags, I'll go with Brian Baker.
I'm gonna go with Ryan Ford.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. I think someone else thought of that as well. I'm going to go with Ryan Ford.
Just to make some good pod, I know Lyman Good won his fight, and it's going to be Good, Daly, War Machine, and Killa B in the 4-man welterweight tournament. So I will go with somebody who could be facing him soon. I'll go with Lyman Good.
Okay. It's not Paul Daly. It's not Brian Baker. It's not Lyman Good. It is Ryan the Real Deal Ford. And it's just worth pointing out that we've got War Machine and Ryan Ford on this week's MMA Mental podcast, so that should be good. So that's 2 to Chris and 1 to Dave. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that all right?
Is that all right? Right.
You all right?
The last one. So
It's cheeky.
this is either for Chris to win or for Dave to tie, and we'll have joint winners for the first time. Okay. You ready for tweet number 5?
Do it.
Bring it on.
I am shaking
Right.
my boots.
Wow, yummy, 4 naked chicks in a hot tub. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Is it number 1, James Thompson? Number 2, Phil DeFries? Number 3, Neil Grove? Number 4, Ollie Thompson?
Oh boy. Getting
What
another
was the second
curveball
one?
served up.
These are all UK heavyweights: James Thompson, Phil DeFries, Neil Grove, or Ollie Thompson.
I'm gonna go with James Thompson.
Patrick.
I'll go with the young buck, Phil DeFries.
You know what? I'm going to break this one down. James Thompson has been accused of being a homosexual many times in his career. There's a picture of him with his shirt off with some other guy, and they're all close, and all the people around him are other dudes. So I'm going to shelf that one, and then we have Ollie Thompson. He seems very uninteresting. Sounds like something he would say. And then we got Philip DeFries. He's living in the U.S. Maybe that would be him. You know what? I'm going to go Phil DeFries.
I was thinking about going Phil DeFries too, but for the sake of levity, I'm going to go with Ollie Thompson.
Okay. I can confirm it's not James the Colossus.
And that means Chris won, right?
Yeah, Chris has won. It's not Ollie Thompson. It's not Phil DeFries. It was Neil the Goliath Grove. So, Chris, you've done it!
Holy
His
fuck.
first win.
Yeah.
Oh,
His
okay.
first win.
I want to thank the Academy. I want to thank
Right, we're
Marijuana.
over to the next bit now. We're not listening. Only joking. Well done. Well done.
Which actually moves Team MMA Podcast into the lead with 3, MMA Mental with 2 wins, and Team Buffalo Dave. You're still batting a pretty good average. You're 1 for 2, and you have half the chance of winning as every other team. But hey, you are special, and you're my special little guy, Dave.
You're
The lone
a little
wolf.
Dave. You're a little Davey.
My little Davey. So we will swiftly move on from me singing to Dave about how he's my little Davey. And finally, Jesus Christ, it has been about time for this lightweight title elimination fight to go down. They've been talking tons of crap about one another. Donald Cerrone and Anthony Pettis. Last week we actually talked about how Donald Cerrone was waiting on Pettis, didn't know if he should move on to another fighter or not, but it seems like Cerrone's concerns were heard and answered. They are going to fight each other January 26th in what's believed to be UFC on Fox 6. It'll be a week after a fight put on in Brazil. So yeah, you have Donald Cerrone, 19-4, riding a 8-1 streak since his loss to Benson Henderson in the WEC. Won his last 2 against Jeremy Stevens and Melvin Gillard, and he's fighting Anthony Pettis, 15-2. He's 6-1 in his last 7, also riding a 2-fight win streak against one similar opponent, Jeremy Stevens, who they both beat by decision, although Pettis was split and Cerrone's was unanimous. Pettis also beat top lightweight Joe Lauzon. Wanted to get your early thoughts on the fight that'll go down in about 2.5 months. Personally, I really think Donald Cerrone is one of the best fighters in the 155-pound division. Pettis, he has put on some pretty impressive stuff. He has wins against Benson Henderson, which I don't think he would have won that fight if it wasn't for that Showtime kick that stole him the 3rd round, and the fight against Joe Lauzon, which was an excellent knockout. But yeah, he lost his fight to Clay Guida, who I think is not as good as a fighter as Donald Cerrone. So just because Cerrone, he has so many tools in his tool belt, I actually see Cerrone winning this one by decision. What about you guys?
When I used to watch Cerrone in the WEC, I knew he'd be good, but I mean, man, like you said, he's 8-1 in his last 9, 6-1 in the UFC. The only person to stop that hype train was Nate Diaz, who's looking quite formidable at the moment himself. And I have to take Cerrone in this fight just because, Pettis, he's been on the shelf for some time with multiple different injuries. We don't know how he's going to come back. And Donald Cerrone, he's been fighting through multiple injuries, getting kicked in the face by his horse, some other injuries, which I'm not completely sure about, so I won't talk about. But I've got to take Cerrone in this. He's looking too good these days.
I think this fight is going to be brilliant. I mean, if you'd looked at this fight at the end of the WEC days, I think we probably would have been leaning towards Pettis. I mean, obviously, he finished the WEC on such a high. He had that fantastic fight with Henderson, and of course, we had the Showtime kick. And then he kind of went on a bit of a downer. He got delayed his title fight because of the situation between Maynard and Edgar, and him drawing and having another fight. And then he lost to Clay Guida. And then he had a lackluster win over Jeremy Stevens, and then he looked great against Joe Lozon. It's a hard fight because if Pettis brings it, he's certainly capable of beating Donald Cerrone. And I think it's got. I mean, we're looking at January. It's already got contender for Fight of the Year for next year already. But I honestly, at the minute, I find it hard to pick. I could see both of them are capable of getting the knockout. I've got a feeling Pettis is going to get back to winning, get back on track, if you like, and get an impressive win. I'm going to lean towards Pettis.
Well, you all know that I'm a huge Donald Cerrone mark. I mean, I don't want to get into breaking down skill sets. I've done that in the previous podcast, and I do want to say actually that I don't think this fight will happen. There's some fights that are doomed to happen, like Alessio Sakara versus Jorge Rivera. You guys remember that? They were scheduled 3 times to fight each other, and then they just kind of gave up. So this one has been canceled 3 times as well, and there's just this dooming feeling that it won't happen. Now, beyond that, if it does, I have Cerrone in this one all day. I think it'll be a competitive fight, but I think Cerrone will find the way to win. He's improved the most, and I think Anthony Pettis has regressed. He's been injured so many times in the last, 2 years that, actually almost, I think 2.5 or something like that. But I don't see him really. I mean, he has a lot of natural talents. Obviously, he can jump off of the cage with one leg, throw a kick with the same leg, and land that shot. So he's just very unconventional. Uses some crazy capoeira moves. It's 2 of the most exciting fighters in the division facing off. So if it does end up happening, I'm game for it. If I had to call it, I'd say Donald Cerrone. If it's a main event, if it's a 5-rounder, I got Cerrone winning by a finish. If it's a 3-rounder, I got Cerrone winning by a probably split decision.
Yeah, I want to first off say it's an excellent idea by the UFC for putting this on a free card, especially on Fox. Like Ray mentioned, this has potential to be for the year for next year already at such an early stage. It's going to be fireworks with this fight. We've seen Cerrone evolve to become one of the top light heavyweights in the world over the past 2-3 years since he's been in the UFC. The guy is just getting better and better. Pettis, his striking is just phenomenal. He's so you never know what this guy's going to throw. The only thing I'm concerned is that Pettis' health issues, and he hasn't really been that active. So I got to give Cerrone the edge there. He's been sitting a little bit, but not as much as Pettis. As for who I'm thinking is going to win, it's a tough call right now, but I would probably give the edge to Cerrone.
Definitely. And I do think most of us think Cerrone does have the edge, whether it be his reach or the amount of tools in his tool belt. This kind of like Chris was saying, it's been kind of a fight surrounded by a lot of things happening. Whether Cerrone's injured, more often than not, Pettis injured. I really hope we get to see it. But if we do see it, that'll be January 26th of next year on Fox, and we'll move on to another fight scheduled for January. The week before, probably in Brazil, we got a middleweight matchup between Michael Bisping and Vitor Belfort. Really, really looking forward to this. Obviously, Vitor Belfort will have the home field advantage in Brazil. And both of these guys, I mean, you look at their records, they really only lose to top guys. I want to say in either one's case, maybe the only exception coming when Michael Bisping lost to Vanderlei Silva. But you look at Vitor Belfort's record since 2006, the only people he's lost to are the best two fighters in the world, Anderson Silva and John Jones. He's gone through everyone else, from Franklin to Lindland to Akiyama to Johnson. He's taken care of people, and taken care of pretty much all of them by finish. Knocked out Akiyama, choked out Anthony Johnson, KO'd Rich Franklin in the first round. Bisping has looked really impressive. I mean, talking about a guy who already was in the top 10, but still improving. He fended off a lot of Chael Sonnen's takedowns, which is something, as far as British fighters goes, their one real knock is lack of wrestling, lack of takedown defense. And Michael Bisping looked dynamite against Chael Sonnen, actually had him winning that fight. And as far as this fight goes, really a matchup of two top middleweights. I think the winner of this fight should fight the winner of Weidman-Boch for an interim championship if Anderson Silva decides to fight GSP next at a catchweight. And as far as seeing what happens, if it ends early, if it ends by knockout, I give it to Vitor because he has some heavy hands. But if Bisping can keep the fight going into, this will probably be a main event or a co-main event. If it's a 5-round fight or a 3-round fight, if it's a longer fight and Bisping can keep it going and it goes to a decision, I really do give the edge to him. But if I had to pick right now, I would call it a Michael Bisping unanimous decision. Because as much as I like Vitor Belfort, he is getting a little bit older. He's 35. He's two years older than Michael Bisping. Both of them have similar reaches. Bisping will have a 2-inch advantage in the reach department, and everything else will be virtually identical. But God, this is much harder to pick, at least for me, than Cerrone Pettis. I wanted to know what your early thoughts were. Will a home field advantage for Belfort play a role? It's going to be January 19th, exactly 1 week before the Cerrone Pettis card. God, what do you guys think about this one? Ray,
are you all right?
Ray, you all right?
Sorry,
I think
I was following the schedule. It should have been Patrick.
Nope. Go ahead.
Nope.
Okay, I've got the wrong schedule. Then it says Patrick for me. This is going to be an amazing fight. I mean, it's kind of like a dream matchup. I mean, it's two guys right towards the top end of the division. I know that Bisping gets a lot of, especially from the American fans, but I think he is very, very underrated, and I think he has been very underrated for quite a long time. But I'm really looking forward to this fight. I'll be leaning towards Bisping. I think the way he fights and the tempo he fights, I think he's capable of tiring Balfour out, and the longer the fight goes, I think he's more than capable of getting a stoppage as well. If it's a 5-round fight, I think Bisping will get a stoppage. If it's a 3-round fight, I think Bisping will win by decision.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was announced that this is the main event. I believe it's also an FX card, if I'm not mistaken. My early thoughts on the fight, I kind of like Belfort in this one. We know what happens when Bisping tries to throw with heavy hitters. Doesn't really work out in his favor quite often. If you think back not too long ago when Belfort just fought Jones, he hit Jones in a serious armbar. And we all seen Bisping with his newfound wrestling since he's been staying in the States. He's been working on his wrestling. Looks great doing it, but I think this is just a really bad matchup for Bisping. If he decides to take it on the ground, what would Vitor do to him? I really don't see Bisping sitting there fighting off as well as Jones did. Jones is a way better wrestler and better on the ground than Bisping is. It's going to be tough for Bisping to pull it off. The only way I think he can pull it off if he can manage to survive and take it later in the rounds. And if Belfort gasses, then he could jump on the opportunity. Other than that, I think it's going to be a tough fight for Bisping to win.
When I look at this fight, I think of strength and weaknesses of both guys. And you have Michael Bisping, who's light on his feet, one of the fastest middleweights out there, much like Vitor Belfort. He's quick. He has awesome defensive wrestling. He's actually improved his wrestling to take other guys down. And, when I look at this fight, I think, okay, where is something, the skill sets, in the skill sets, where do they match up where it's even? Or where is there a giant hole? And I really can't think of one, really. I mean, Vitor is super strong. His swarming ability is amazing. He has a tendency to gas and kind of give up when he can't impose his will. So I feel that the first round is really going to decide the tone of the fight. I mean, if Vitor can swarm and Bisping can put the pressure off and angle out, it's going to be Bisping all day. If Vitor can actually out-wrestle Bisping and use a well-rounded game plan, which he has in the past, I feel it's going to be all Belfort. Beyond a lucky punch between the two of them, I really feel that Michael Bisping's going to take this fight, and I think he's going to finish Vitor, if I had to guess, by submission, but I could see a TKO as well.
Patrick, you all right?
I'm all right. This is it really is a tough fight, especially comparing skill set to skill set. Michael Bisping, he looked really good against Brian Stann. Of course, Vitor Belfort, he's a bit better in every area than Brian Stann is. This is just such a tough fight to call. I'm leaning Vitor Belfort early. Just because, like it's been mentioned, he's got that just swarming killer instinct. And although Bisping, I like Bisping as a fighter. He's a great, he's a real technical fighter. He's smart. I just think that Vitor, he's going to come in hungry, and he's going to come in and put it on Bisping. I've got him taking this fight, and I think we just might see a TKO out of it.
Yeah, and if we do see a TKO, I mentioned that I would give the edge to Belfort. Patrick, if you could turn down your reverb a little bit, you son of a bitch. I would predict that Belfort gets the TKO, but Bisping has shown some power, and really this could go any way. I mean, both dudes are top middleweights. Really looking forward to seeing how this works itself out. Vitor almost ended John Jones in the first round. That probably would have overtaken Sarah GSP as the craziest upset ever in UFC history. But this. Both dudes will probably have pretty even odds in Vegas, and I'm looking forward to see what goes down. Stylistically, if I were to give the edge to anybody, it'd be Bisping by a hair, but I'd give that hair back to Belfort just because it's in Brazil, and we've seen Brazilian fighters really excel there in front of their home crowd. And if it is a FX card, that'll be pretty cool. I think every Brazil card so far has been a pay-per-view. It'll be a nice way to get those people who don't necessarily want to shell out $60 for a pay-per-view to really get a feel for that wild Brazil crowd. And also get our boy John Anik and Kenny Florian a chance to feel out that Brazilian atmosphere. And we'll move on to our last topic before we get to the bonehead of the week. And it is a topic that was actually brought up on the MMAplayground.com, which I thought about it. It's a really compelling argument, and it doesn't have, even after I've thought about it for a while, there's no real clear answer. And the question is, which title holder has the toughest challenge ahead? All 8 current champions do have scheduled fights, the one exception being Anderson Silva, who just got off his fight against Stephan Bonnar. We don't know if he's going to fight a middleweight next, GSP next. He said he's not going back up to light heavyweight again. So you have 7 options. Really, the kind of 2 I can rule out immediately are John Jones and Demetrius Johnson. But here are the 7 current champions matchups at heavyweight. You have champion Junior Dos Santos taking on Cain Velasquez. Cain Velasquez, a former champion, has probably the biggest gas tank of all of the heavyweights, but we know JDS can pack a punch. Like I mentioned before, light heavyweight, you have the future Ultimate Fighter coaches, John Jones and Chael Sonnen. I think most people give John Jones a big edge there. Welterweight coming up in just a couple of weeks, George St. Pierre versus Carlos Condit. That is going to be a barn burner. Condit, the interim champion, been blazing through people. You have Ben Henderson facing Nate Diaz, who himself has been on a tear. Really put it to Jim Miller and Donald Cerrone. I mean, neither of those fights really were much of anything because Nate dominated it so much. You have Jose Aldo taking on Frankie Edgar, the former lightweight champion, now starting to cut a little weight, go down to featherweight. Dominic Cruz versus Renan Barão. A lot of people have Barão in their top 10 pound for pound. Dominic Cruz obviously coming off that knee injury. We don't know when the fight's going to happen, but Renan Barão has expressed that he is going to wait for Dominic Cruz to come back before we see a unification of the interim and the undisputed championship. And like I said, at flyweight, the inaugural champion Demetrius Johnson is going to be making his first title defense against John Dodson, who just came off that win against Jussier da Silva. So like I said, right off the bat, I eliminate Chael and Dodson. I think they're both going to be pretty big underdogs. But Jesus Christ, what contenders we have coming up in Cain, Condit, Diaz, Edgar, and Barão. And it's really hard to pick one of these guys out. The first thing that comes to mind is picking Edgar or Barão, because they are guys who are on my top 10 pound for pound list and are really, really impressive. But you know what? I'm gonna give it to George St. Pierre versus Carlos Condit. I think Carlos Condit, hasn't fought in a title fight yet, but dude just has so many weapons. He has an excellent gas tank, is a great striker, and the one thing why I think he's going to pose a challenge to George St. Pierre, other than the knee injury, which we have no idea where GSP is there, Condit is excellent at wrestling defense, and I don't think Condit is going to let George St. Pierre take him down. Condit's going to make it a standing up fight, and I really think Condit has more weapons standing up than George St. Pierre is. He's really going to make GSP move around a lot, be very active standing up. GSP is a great boxer. He has that famed Superman punch, but as far as kicks go, I mean, Condit has a slew of high kicks, flying knees, puts together combos so well. And as much as I kind of want to give it to Frankie Edgar or Renan Barão, I'm giving it to Carlos Condit as the toughest title toughest title challenger of that slew of challengers. Chris?
Well, I'm going to say first off, I agree with just about everything you have to say. I can rule out JDS Cain. I mean, that was a 1 minute long fight. Yeah, Cain will probably last longer, but ultimately JDS is a bad man. I think the only guy to dethrone him is Alistair Overeem. So we look at Bones versus Chael. That's laughable. We all agree with that. That's just beyond stupid. Johnson versus Dodson. That's we really don't know enough about those guys at that weight division to really make a summation. So let's look at Condit GSP, the one that you picked. I think that GSP, if he comes in 100%, which is possible, I mean, I know it's been a long road, but if he comes in 100%, he will win that fight. That's why I'm not picking it. So that leaves Bendo and Nate. Nate Diaz has that pressuring style, and he's got that sick jiu-jitsu. He's tapped so many guys out, but Bendo's one of his greatest weapons is his wrestling and his submission defense. So even though I think Nate is a very dangerous challenger, I'm not thinking that's the best one, because Benson Henderson can take a shot, dish it back, and has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, that Showtime kick couldn't even knock him out, and he's never been tapped out in MMA competition. So I'm ruling that one out. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's a tie between Cruz, Barao, and Aldo versus Edgar. Jose Aldo has never faced a fighter with the kind of footwork, speed, and angling that Edgar poses against him. So I think that's very compelling. And, Dominic Cruz has a very unorthodox style where he's bouncing in and out. He's, changing angles. He's using his core to change his body position to where guys are just missing drastically, kind of like how Anderson Silva does it. And Renan Barao is one scary dude. He made Uriah Faber look like just a bag full of bricks, just slow and plodding. So I think that those are the two most compelling matchups, and I think those will be the toughest fights for the champions.
Yeah, it boils down to 3-1 for me. GSP kind of Bendo versus Nate, Aldo versus Edgar. I think personally, I think I had to go with Bendo versus Nate. I think Nate caused a lot of problems for Bendo. We've seen Frankie Edgar rock him pretty good. And I don't know, I just think Nate brings a lot more to the table against Bendo. I think they match up pretty well, but I think that reach, and I think his, like Chris hinted on, his smothering style, it's going to pose a lot of problems for Bendo. We've seen him get rocked pretty hard against Frankie, and I think Nate could just, with his pitter-patter jabs and stuff like that, I think he's just going to outwork him. He's got, I'm not sure if he has the reach advantage on him, but if they get to the ground, Nate can slap on something pretty damn quick. I think that's what I'm leaning towards.
Patrick, you all right?
Patrick?
Looks like we may have lost him. He connects through his phone, so a lot of times we have a little bit of service interruption with him. I guess we'll move up. Is he back? No, he's not. We'll move on to Ray, and then hopefully we get Patrick back by the time Ray's done breaking this down.
Well, yeah, I've looked at the fights. We've got, obviously, you say we've got 7 title fights. The first thing I wanted to point out was that Jake said that Condit hadn't had a title fight, but he is the interim champion. So he obviously had the 5-round fight with Nick Diaz. And, I think it's fair to say that classes as a title fight. So I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, I've gone through. I mean, out of the fights, I've actually got 2 of the champions losing. I think JDS is going to do to Kane what he did last time. I think Bones versus Chael, I think is pretty straightforward. I think by the time that fight comes round, we'll all be excited for it because Sonnen can promote anything. But I think Bones will win. I think Condit's great, but I think GSP will do what GSP does, and I think he'll grind out a UD like he always does. Aldo Edgar is going to be a great fight, but I've just got a feeling Aldo's going to do something spectacular in that fight and get the knockout. And I like what Chris said about Johnson Dodson. We just don't know enough about these guys yet. Dodson looked really good in his last fight, but Johnson went off that great win over Benavidez, so you can't discount what he did against Benavidez. So I'm looking at the ones where I think are going to lose. I think Bendo's going to lose to Nate because Nate looked absolutely epic in his last 2 fights against Miller and Cerrone, and I think Renan Barao is going to take the title off Dominic Cruz again. I think Renan Barao is the future of that division. I really think he's going to dominate that division for a long time. If I had to pick one, I'd say that the most difficult challenge for the champion is Dominic Cruz versus Renan Barao.
Yeah, and Barao really, really a top pound-for-pound guy. And if you want to talk about MMA math, he put it to Uriah Faber harder than Cruz could in 2 attempts. It looks like Patrick's system's still a little bit buggered, but Ray, let's move on and do a little Fight Busters repeat, and then hopefully if Patrick is back at the end of that, then we can have him hop on and break it down, because this really is a pretty compelling argument we have going here.
Okay, so I've got the 3 Fight Busters, and again I break down somebody's name and give some cryptic clues, and you've got to try and get in my mind. So this is the 3 clues. The first clue is correct. incorrect, and then kill. The second clue is I've got lots of money, I'm tough, bring on the stones. And the third clue is steal some jewellery. If you want to have a go at those 3 clues, you can email email us mmamental@hotmail.com, and you've got till next Monday. What we'll also do is on the MMA Mental podcast and on the MMApodcast.com, we'll give out the initials for the answers, but that's not going to be till Wednesday. So you've got to listen to them to get the initials if you want some help in getting those answers.
Definitely, and you also could tweet Ray or myself at MMA Mental at the MMA Podcast. If you tweet it at me, I'll obviously forward it over to our buddy Ray, and if you tweet at MMA Mental, that'll get right to Ray. It looks like Patrick's still down, so I'll talk for another 30 seconds or so, a minute or so about this whole title holder thing, because I had another bit to add, and if Patrick still isn't on, we'll move on to our Fight Busters. You know, I really think Kane does deserve a lot of merit in this. He did get knocked out by Dos Santos in a minute, but he is a top guy. He put it to Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar was Brock. He Brock Lesnar when Brock Lesnar was Brock Lesnar, so to speak. You know, but God, all of these guys are so good. Nate Diaz with his excellent performances against Miller and against Donald Cerrone. If I wasn't picking Carlos Condit, it would be between Edgar and Barao. And of those two guys, even though Barao is a top guy, I do have him in my top 10 pound for pound list. I kind of want to give it to Edgar, just because Edgar has done a lot more in the UFC at a higher weight class than Barao has against, really, you know, he did have his title fight against Faber, he fought Jorgensen. Other than that, he's kind of been untested, a guy up at Cruz's level, and I think my pandering and ranting, you back P-Money?
I'm
Sweet
back.
Pappy
Yeah,
Jones, there he is.
There he is.
Sorry, gentlemen.
Take it away, homie.
Oh, sure. I didn't want to just cut you off like that. Yeah, like you were saying though, lots of tough contenders coming up for the champions right now. I'm gonna have to go with my man Buffalo Dave, and I'm gonna side with Nate Diaz, being the biggest threat to the current champion in Benson Henderson. I just think Diaz is a style nightmare for him. Some people would argue it's the opposite, that Benson Henderson with his wrestling is the style nightmare. I just think that Nate Diaz, he's still a young guy, and as we've seen since he's dropped back to lightweight, I think he's put on a little more mass. He's looking a little more bulky at 155. That power has shown in all of his fights, really, coming back down. He's been hurting people, dropping people bad. We saw what he did to Cerrone. We saw what he did to Miller, to Gomi. And he's always had good boxing. So now it seems like he's got the power. He's been working a lot with the judo and stuff with Ronda Rousey and her camp, Manny Gambarian, which I think has been helping his takedown defense. And he's just been on a real tear. I think, combine that with Ben's performances against Frankie Edgar, I haven't been too sold on him. I don't think he won the second fight. Whether or not he even won the first fight is, kind of a point of debate. So, like I said, I'm going to go with Buffalo Dave here, and I'm going to take Ben Henderson having the toughest road ahead of him with Nate Diaz.
Yeah, never count a Diaz brother out of a fight. Those dudes are insane. And let's hope, Nate, Patrick, if you could turn down your reverb a little bit. Let's all just hope and keep our fingers crossed that he doesn't fail a marijuana test like his brother did in his last fight. That would definitely be a pretty bonehead move. And speaking of boneheads, it's about time for our bonehead of the week. So let us get that back on the tracks and talk about who we think was our biggest bonehead. We usually, we'll go with a fighter, or we'll go with some judges or an athletic commission. But this week, I gotta give the bonehead of the week to myself. Just to kind of take you behind the scenes a little bit, I actually don't get home from work until like 20 or 30 minutes before the show starts. I'll put some topics together during the day while I'm at work, and if anyone I'm working with hears this, I don't do that, but I'll send out the topics and whatnot. We actually lost internet today at work, so it was doubly stressful. I had to, pick out some topics and everything in the 20-minute window I have between when I get home at 5:40 Central Time and 6 Central Time when the show starts. And I had this scab on my knee, because when I get drunk, I like to do stupid things, which include jumping off high objects, wearing like flip-flops, and just busting my ass. So I had this, I'm basically a 10-year-old when it comes to scabbing up my legs and my arms. I just dive onto concrete. So I had this kind of sizable scar, which probably needed a good week to come off, and I'm sort of in a rush. I wasn't running or anything, but I walk in the door and I toss my backpack, which I bring to work every day, onto my bed. And in my efforted toss, I smack my leg and in turn my scab against this corner table, which is conveniently right at knee to shin level. Knock the scab off of my leg, and it literally, I think I took a quarter roll of paper towel, which I didn't have time to throw it away. So literally now I'm surrounded by squares of paper towel covered in blood, because I decided to kick my leg, which obviously I didn't do it intentionally, but I kicked my leg against the table, scab comes off, blood everywhere, which is why the show started 5 minutes late today, because whereas I wanted to just walk in the door and start finding topics, I had to walk in the door and spend 5 or 10 minutes cleaning blood off my leg before I could, sit down and start working on this, because I didn't want just a stream of blood going down my entire leg and dry and have to deal with that after the show. So my bonehead of the month, of the week, is Jake Walters.
Jacobius Walters.
Man up.
Yeah, tearing his fucking leg apart. Yeah. Excuse me. My bonehead of the week is the entire cast of The Ultimate Fighter 16. I mean, come on, son. You guys are beyond bad at what you do. I mean, there's a couple exceptions. Bristol Mirande, the guy that was on our show last week, was absolutely fantastic. And, there's a couple exceptions. I think Neil, can't remember his name, he's a black guy. Neil Wayne or something like that. He's really good as well. But for the most part, these guys just get in the house. Yo, there you go. Sorry. So there's Ray for the save. But these guys get in the house, and it seems like now, the 16th season, they feel entitled. They feel like, okay, I made it this far. Now I get to be in the UFC. And it's the furthest from the truth, man. You have one of the greatest opportunities in combat sports, and these guys are absolutely wasting it by doing stupid things and not fighting to their potential. Last week, we finally had a fight that ended with a finish, and was pretty impressive. A guillotine that took about minute and a half to sink in. And I think that these guys just need to wake the fuck up and pull their heads out of their asses. I know it's a really intense situation to have to go through it. You're stuck with a bunch of other alpha males. You don't have any internet. You don't have any TV. But goddamn, it's an opportunity, and take it. Seize the opportunity. Don't just waste it away and waste the fans' time and Zuva's time.
Well, my bonehead, I suppose it kind of comes off the back of this, but I'm actually, instead of going for the cast, I'm singling out one person on the cast, and my bonehead of the week is Julian Lane. All I'm going to say is, let me bang, bro, let me bang. Then crying like a little bitch. The guy is an absolute embarrassment. He really rubs me the wrong way. It reminds me, it's like having Junior Brown back in the house again. Just a guy, he obviously belongs in a trailer. He's just an absolute dickhead. But yeah, my bonehead of the week is Julian Lane.
That is a fantastic choice, Ray. For myself, for my bonehead of the week, I'm going to have to go ahead and I was going to pick Stephen Bonner, but I'm going to have to switch it up, and I'm going to have to nominate myself as well, Patrick Johnson, as the Bonehead of the Week. Yeah, I'm a huge radio guy. I love listening to local, national radio. So I'm listening to this nationally syndicated show one night, and they said, "Oh, who are you taking for this weekend? What are your picks for this weekend? What's your bet going to be?" And of course, they were talking about NFL, NBA, stuff like that. But I said, you know what? I'll send them my MMA bet. See, try and look like a fucking smart guy. And first of all, I never give out my bets. Second of all, I didn't even do any research for it. I was just like, oh yeah, why don't you go ahead and take Mike Richmond over Shabalai Shamilayev and parlay that with Ryan Ford. Well, of course, the Ryan Ford part came out, but I'd never seen Shabalai Shamilayev fight. I could barely say his name. And next thing I know, I turn on the DVR and there's Mike Richmond getting knocked the fuck out, and I'm looking like an idiot. So I'll have to nominate myself for Bonehead of the Week.
You fucking dumb.
I'm smart. Don't be mean, Chris.
Hey, sorry, I won, and I'm just dishing it out, you guys. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Yeah, I'm riding high.
You're riding high right now, but just you wait, mister.
All right, so I myself went outside the box on this one too for this week, and I'm nominating a poster on the MMA Playground. One of the guys that we all seem to always shake our heads at and never know what the hell this guy, kid, or whatever is really thinking when he posts the stuff that he posts. Whether or not he's trying to deliberately be a troll or he's just as much of a moron, we don't know. But anyhow, my pick is the King Smasher. And his post from Eddie Alvarez becoming a free agent, he writes, "I just don't see a huge contract really because the light division is exciting for the most part already. Granted, he has had exciting fights. Is he going to boost pay-per-views? I doubt it. I just can't see Alvarez being so aggressive against guys like Cerrone, Pettis, Gillard. I think Lombard got a big contract because the division is weak for contenders and Silva title fights." What the hell does that even mean? I want to know. I have no idea.
Yeah, the Smasher isn't necessarily known as the most brilliant poster on the MMA Playground. I know we have a lot of listeners who tune in to the Playground and post there, and if you don't, you should. It's a really cool community. But yeah, you can join in our hate for this. Not hate. Hate's a strong word, but our rage, our DC rage, so to speak, for this one individual guy. So, man, of those five, I kind of want to vote for P Money just because it's funny to vote for another MMA roundtableist, if you want to call it that. But I think I'm going to give it to Chris's nomination, the entire cast of Tough 16. Actually, I had been thinking, man, recently, the last few seasons, they've given, it seems like, half of the cast of all these Ultimate Fighter seasons contracts in the UFC, which kind of takes away from the whole format. The reason Bonner Griffin went out there so hard and were swinging so crazily is because they thought that the loser would have to go back to his old life and wouldn't get a job in the UFC. And now you get 10 out of 16 guys getting contracts after a season. This has been a piss-poor season of The Ultimate Fighter, and I am thrilled that we'll only see one or maybe two guys get a contract after the final fights. And to add a little bias in there, I hope it's MMA Podcast alumni Bristol Marundi, because he head kicks rapists, and he's an all-around badass.
Yeah, good job, my friend.
That guy, he's an all-around head-kicking raper, or not dad.
Whoa. Yeah, no, he head kicks the rapist. That's how it works. He's the guy who head kicks them.
He head kicks then rapes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna go with seeing as how Dave's. I don't know him. I'm not a real active member on the Playground. I need to apologize to everyone. There's just so much stuff out on the internet. I can't see how I could possibly spend, more time than I do on there on something that I'm not familiar with. I should give it a shot. I know you guys are all awesome, but so I'm not going to go for that. Patrick voting for himself. I like the guy. Can't really do that. Jake, you busted your knee up and you bled out. I'm not going to go with that. So I'm going to say Julian Lane because that guy's a piece of shit.
I'm gonna go towards because obviously I do post on the playground and I get to see how much shit this guy stirs up, and I think he's just a wind-up merchant personally. I don't see how he can be serious with some of his comments, but I'm going to go for King Smasher as the bonehead of the week for me.
Well, a whole lot of very worthy nominations here this week. Myself, I'll have to go for Julian Lane specifically, just because to hear Ray swear with such conviction in that manner regarding this guy.
Yeah, that was scary.
The passion that came forth through the microphone that hit my ears. I love it. God damn it. That's what I like to hear. I like to hear my boy Ray getting fired up. I'm going with Julian Lane.
I'm going to follow suit. I'm just definitely going to agree with the same things Patrick said. I mean, how could you not love Ray getting fired up over something like that? The King Smasher, he's the bonehead of the freaking year. He doesn't need to be the bonehead of the week.
And geez, it looks like because Ray stirred up so much emotion, looks like the winner of Bonehead of the Week goes to King Smasher.
Me bang, bro. Let me bang.
Let me bang, bro. Let me bang.
Hey Ray, I won tweet of the week, and you won Bonehead. Congratulations!
Hell yeah.
Well played.
Well played.
Way to bring up your glory as well, Chris. I
don't like to ruffle my own feathers, but I am a giant warhawk, and I will destroy you.
And unless Chris has anything else to add about his tweet of the week victory, Chris.
I just want to thank all the other contestants for trying. I mean, it's not. It really wasn't a competition. It was more of a trouncing. So maybe next week you guys will luck out. I don't know. We'll see.
Hopefully. We will indeed see. And actually this Saturday we have a UFC fight. We haven't had one of those in a few weeks. Glad to welcome the UFC back into my life. We actually have 2 fights in the next 2 weekends. This Saturday is going to be UFC on Fuel 6. I believe the first UFC event going down in China. It's going down in Macau. That's going to be really interesting to see. Obviously, the following week, UFC 154, George St. Pierre versus Carlos Condit. That's going to be really exciting. So let's break down the top 3 fights on this UFC China card. Headlined by Rich Franklin versus Kung Lee. We'll get to that last. That'll be our last topic of the day. But the third fight down from the top, we have Dong Yong Kim versus Paulo Thiago, and what actually should be a really interesting fight. Paulo Thiago is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a black Dan in Judo, which I think makes this really impressive. Obviously, Dong Yong Kim is a Judo expert. He's a 4th Dan in Judo, likes tossing around guys in that respect. Kim's got a little bit of height and reach on him, I think 2 inches in both departments. You look at the record, it's kind of weird. Both of them are coming off of losses at the welterweight division. Paulo Thiago's 1-3 in his last 4, but those 3 losses have been to pretty top guys. He beat David Mitchell at UFC 134 in Brazil in front of his hometown crowd. That was a unanimous decision. But he also lost unanimous decisions to Diego Sanchez and Martin Kampmann and got knocked out this past April in CR Bahadurzada's last fight. It's kind of been his signature win up to this point. Dong Yong Kim, on the other hand, 1-2 in his last 3. Dude actually beat Nate Diaz, which I believe was Nate Diaz's most recent loss. That was New Year's, January 1st, 2011. Since then, losing to Carlos Condit, and I think we all remember that flying knee that literally sent his eyes up rolling in his head, just That is the sound that.
Did he get shocked?
That was probably. It actually looked like he was being shocked. I mean, he was kind of shaking a little bit, and his eyes were all rolled up in his head. It was kind of a scary knockout, probably Condit's most visceral knockout so far in the UFC. That was 3 minutes into the first round of UFC 132. Obviously lost.
Face fractures.
Yeah. Lost to Damian Maia, which that was more of a freak fight than anything. Damian Maia actually broke one of Dong Yeon Kim's ribs in UFC 148 less than a minute into the fight, so that got called from a TKO. None of us know what would have happened if Kim hadn't have fallen really awkwardly and broken a rib. I'm personally giving this one to the stun gun, Dong Yeon Kim. I think he's a top welterweight. I actually remember summer 2011, we were breaking down this fight, and my co-host at the time, Josh Webb, was convinced that Dong Yeon Kim was going to beat Carlos Condit, and had some pretty good logic to it. I think he's extremely good at judo, probably the best judo player in the UFC, to be completely honest. Fourth Dan, that is not something to fuck with. So even though I think Paulo Thiago, he'll lose, but I hope he stays in the UFC, even though that would put him at 1-4 in his last 5. All those losses to really top welterweights. But I'm giving this one to the 30-year-old South Korean. What do you guys think?
Just wanted to say, firstly, you talked about Paulo Thiago's last fight. I just wanted to say I was there live for that one when he got knocked out.
Nice.
He got knocked out by the sniper because no one could see the punch. You just seen Paulo Thiago drop. But it was obviously CR's debut. And
that was in Sweden, debut. Right?
He just went straight out. It was crazy. But yeah, going back to this fight, I'm thinking that Dong Kim's going to keep up the tempo, and he'll put Thiago on his back. And I know Thiago can fight off his back, but fighters like Kim, they win their fights by being able to avoid the submissions. If you think Kim could hang on top of Nate Diaz for 15 minutes, which is what he did, and Diaz was active like he always is, and he was looking for submissions, I just think he'll be able to do it with Paulo Thiago. He'll have him on his back for 15 minutes. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the best fight. I think Thiago will always be in the fight, but I think Kim will grind out a decision.
Yeah, Dong Yeon Kim is a fantastic grappler. A lot of people in the past have given him, kind of some hate for the fact that he doesn't really finish a lot of fights, and he's kind of the Korean version of John Fitch, which I can kind of see that. But I really appreciate the high level of grappling that he brings in. He has had some awesome, judo throws, which I love judo. I mean, to take someone and send them flying through the air is spectacular, not only in regular life, but at the highest level of competition. So to see someone do that, I have a lot of respect for the guy. Now, do I think he's super exciting? No. I can appreciate his skill set, though, and Paulo Thiago is one of my favorite guys of all time. I think that he actually probably has the hardest career in the UFC, like just as far as strength of competition. I mean, first fight, Josh Koscheck. Second fight, John Fitch. And he's fought Campman, he's fought Swick, he's fought Sanchez. Like, the guy just has, I think, one of the roughest roads in the UFC, and I think that he has an awesome skill set. He's kind of fallen off lately. He couldn't finish Mitchell, got knocked out by Jada, whatever that fucking guy's name is. Can't even think of it right now. But, I think that Paulo Thiago is a fantastic mixed martial artist, and as far as how they match up, man, they're both great grapplers. I see Dong Yeon Kim being a stronger top guy, Paulo being on his back for this fight.
He's a power bottom.
Yeah. Paulo's a power bottom. Dong is a power top. So I think it's going to neutralize, but I think it's going to come down to being kind of a cage clinch fest. That's the way I see this fight going.
For me, I could see this fight. I primarily have it leaning towards Dong Yeon Kim. He, for my money, I like his wrestling better than I like Paulo Thiago's striking, and that's kind of how I see it. I would say Paulo Thiago may have the striking advantage. I don't really like Kim's stand-up, but I think his wrestling is just his wrestling is a higher level skill than Thiago's striking, if you will. So I have to go with Kim in this one. He's just going to grind it out. And Jake, you referenced Kim's fight with Nate Diaz, and for me, I think Nate Diaz won that fight. I don't think Kim really mounted any kind of offense. He just, he had one good punch that whole fight, which people like to make gifs out of and kind of blow it out of context. But for me, that was Nate Diaz's fight. But that's just me, and that's just how I score things. But I do think Kim will have enough just with the ability that he has. He is like a Korean John Fitch or a Korean GSP. He'll just come in, he'll blanket, and that's pretty much how I see this fight going. I could be wrong. I like Paulo Thiago, great mixed martial artist. I'd love to see him get the win because I do find him more entertaining as a fighter. I just feel in this fight I got to lean towards Kim.
Yeah, I'm following suit here too. My money's on Yum Yum Kim, as Joey Coco Diaz likes to call him.
Yum Yum Kim, cocksucker.
Yeah, I just see him using the wrestling just to blanket him, and it's not gonna be one of the most exciting fights to watch. But had this match happen, 2-3 years ago, I'd probably be more inclined to take Paulo Thiago. But he's just. He's definitely faced a lot of tough opponents in the UFC, that's for sure, but I don't know, he's not really progressing. He's just kind of like at a stalemate really right now. But, give him the puncher's chance, that's about it. Other than that, I just see Kim grinding out a 3-round decision.
Yeah, and, I think most of us do think that if Kim wants to, even though Thiago is a black Dan in judo, nobody has the judo acumen that Dong-Yong Kim or Yum Yum Kim has. So I really think that Kim will be able to get Thiago to the ground and impose his will on him. In the co-main event, talking about a puncher's chance, we have a couple of dudes who love to swing. Thiago Silva versus Stanislav Nedkov. Obviously, this is going to be a fight at light heavyweight. Looking just at the stats of both guys, Thiago Silva is going to have a significant reach advantage on Nedkov. Silva sporting a 75-inch reach. Nedkov was 71, so he's going to have 4 inches of reach on him. I think most people think that both guys will want to stand and bang. Even though Silva and Nedkov are both black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they are guys who tend to want to stand up more. Nedkov is 12-0, half of his wins coming by knockout. Silva obviously 14-3, with 11 of his 14 wins coming by knockout. So they all prefer the knockout. And looking at it, Nedkov is undefeated, but he hasn't fought anybody really yet of note. He did fight Randleman in 2009, but that's obviously not fighting Randleman at the prime of his career, and he actually only won that by a split decision. Beat Luis Kane at UFC 134. I think he was one of the only non-Brazilian fighters to get a win on that card. But looking at it, Thiago Silva has fought a lot of top guys. I mean, really, even though Silva has losses and Nedkov is undefeated, I would still give the edge record-wise to Thiago Silva, just because, Nedkov, the hardest guy he's fought is Luis Kane. You look at Silva's record, he's almost fought, he has fought the who's who of the 205-pound division. He's fought Gustafsson, Vera, Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, and even though he didn't win any of those fights, he's a combined 0-3 with one no contest coming against Vera, which he originally won, but that fight was overturned after they found out he submitted animal urine to the Las Vegas, the Nevada State Commission. Kind of one of the oddest failed drug test stories. Like, Thiago, are you a horse? Like, kind of bizarre. He would even try and submit animal urine, but just because Nedkov hasn't really fought anybody and Silva has fought a lot of people. Silva obviously 1-3 with 1 no contest in his last 5. I almost feel like the UFC is overmatching Nedkov in his second fight in the UFC just to kind of get Thiago Silva back on the right track, and I have this one, Thiago Silva by knockout. Dave?
Buffalo Dave.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Yeah, I also like Silva in this fight too. As Jake pointed out, Nedkov really hasn't fought any top level competition. I mean, he fought Louise Kane his very first fight, and we all know how Louise Kane does in the UFC, especially in the light heavyweight division. He doesn't fare too well. Looking at his record, he's fought Kevin Randleman back in 2009, Travis Weave, both, veterans, no names, but those guys also aren't world class, great in competition at this point in their careers. I mean, Travis Weave still is pretty good, but Randleman, come on. I don't know. It's going to be really hard for Nedkov to pull this off. I just hope Silva's clean for this fight and pulls off the win and get his career going again.
This is a pretty one-sided fight, in my opinion. Thiago Silva is just leagues above Stanislav Nedkov. And even like in Nedkov's UFC fight against Louis Kane, he was being rocked by Louis Kane. Then, of course, he caught Kane with a punch, and when Kane gets hit, Kane just wilts. So it's still, I don't see any way that he can beat Thiago Silva. I liken this fight to Thiago Silva's fight with Houston Alexander, where Alexander would look good, but Silva was a class above. And I think Silva will come in, he'll have the advantage with the striking, because I think his striking will be crisper. I see Silva punching straight, and I see Nedkov swinging. And then if Silva decides to take it to the ground, he'll take him down and pound him out. But I'd be very shocked if Nedkov made it into round 2, just because I think Silva's that good.
Yeah, you guys bring up a good point that Thiago Silva has faced the cream of the tip. I mean, he finished Houston Alexander, he finished Jardine, he's fought Rashad, he's fought Vera, he's fought Gustafsson, he finished James Irvin, and all these guys he's looked impressive against. And if it was any other guy versus Thiago Silva, I'd be like, well, maybe he has a shot. But we are talking about a guy who hasn't really had a distinguished career, and ultimately, I think he's kind of Thiago Silva is one of those guys that he obviously falsified a urine sample, as Jake brought up, but he has looked really good, even against Rashad Evans. He had Rashad Evans hurt in the 3rd round. He almost finished him, and he absolutely tooled Brandon Vera, had a rough go against Alexander Gustafsson, and I think that Nedkov has just a puncher's chance. He's kind of a fire plug, stocky guy. So if we look at everything, from a logical standpoint, Thiago Silva should win this. There's something in my mind that says that off of a counter or a clinch that Nedkov is going to catch Thiago Silva and knock his ass out. So I'm going Stanislav Nedkov just based off of gut reaction. Everything points towards Thiago Silva, but for some reason I think Nedkov has this.
Well, that's a very bold prediction there, Chris. And, if you look at the momentum, like it's been brought up, the momentum is on Nedkov's side, although it has been a long layoff for him since his victory over Luis Kane in Brazil. So, I really like Rabbi's summation of the fight. That's one that pretty much just came right out of my brain. I mean, I remember watching that fight. And Nedkov was getting lit up by Louise Kane. And I think Thiago Silva, he's just a little bit better in the stand-up, a little more lethal, and just a little bit better all around than Louise Kane, to say the least. So I'm going to have to go with Thiago Silva, absolutely. First round knockout.
Ooh, first round knockout, yeah. I think most of us think that Silva will probably win the fight, but I like Chris kind of going out on a limb saying Nedkov with the counter, which that brings us to our last topic of the evening, this Saturday's main event between middleweights Rich Franklin and Kung Lee. Really, really compelling matchup. Both of them a little bit older. Lee, 40 years old. Franklin, 38. Franklin, obviously, probably, aside from Anderson Silva, the most historic and most dominant middleweight title holder in history. Kung Lee, he he really hasn't fought too much in the UFC yet. He only has 2 UFC fights under his belt. He had his first 8 fights in Strikeforce, going 7-1 before losing to Vanderlei Silva and Patrick Cote. Both via fight to Cote, winning by unanimous decision in July. I kind of like the previous fight. Think we're going to see mostly stand-up with this. Both of them would probably rather stand up in this fight. Franklin, a more boxing-centric guy, where Lee has amazing taekwondo, really famous for that spinning back kick. But Lee is really going to be, talk about reach disadvantages. Nedkoff is only going to have a 4-inch reach disadvantage, which is still pretty sizable. Rich Franklin has a 7-inch reach advantage in this. Lee with a reach of only 69 inches. Franklin at 76, even though Franklin is only 3 inches taller than his opponent. Franklin really impressed me in his last fight against Vanderlei Silva. Moved around pretty well to the unanimous decision. And like I say all the time, I hate MMA math, which it probably doesn't sound like it because I've gone back and done MMA math so many times looking at fights. But I think it's applicable here just because they both were recent fights. Vanderlei fought Rich Franklin this previous June, and Vanderlei fought Kung Lee this past November, just about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. Actually, they're Vanderlei's 2 most recent fights. He beat Kung Lee, lost to Rich Franklin, and I'm not giving it to Franklin just because of that, but look at the way that he beat both guys, and it really showed that Rich Franklin can hang in there when he gets rocked, and Kung Lee can't necessarily do that. If Kung Lee rocks Rich Franklin, I think Rich Franklin's going to be able to keep his wits about him, stay in it, stay in the fight, and that's mainly why, along with superior boxing movement, just more experience. The guy has so much experience in mixed martial arts. He's 29-6, whereas Kung Lee is only 8-2. And if only simply for experience, that's why I'm giving the edge to Rich Franklin. I'll say by unanimous decision.
For me, I got to take this fight. I'm picking Rich Franklin to get a stoppage in this one. Like you mentioned, Jake, he's got a sizable height and reach advantage in this one, and I think he's going to be able to exploit that very well. He's one of the smartest fighters in the UFC. He's got such a high fight IQ. And going back to his second fight with Vanderlei Silva at UFC 147, I was actually just rewatching this one a couple days ago, and it was just a barn burner. And like you were also mentioning, Jake, about the chin and composure difference with Franklin that just comes with being a veteran of the sport like he is. When he got dropped in the second round against Vanderlei Silva, I mean, that was a point. His head bounced off the mat. He was dropped so fantastically. I mean, 99.9% of fighters are finished after that. And Vanderlei did follow up with some ground and pound. And he was able to just off of instinct, really. He said he didn't even remember while he was in the fight. He didn't remember, anything until like the 5th round after that shot. But just going off his instinct and just the pure fighter that he is, I think he's going to take this one. I think he's going to get the stoppage. He's got, I take him to have an advantage just about everywhere, even standing. Kung Lee has that unorthodox style, but Rich Franklin, he's one of the best at 185, and I think he'll make light work of Kung Lee.
So what I want to bring up about the reach, which obviously Jake pointed out the reach, but I think something that you've overlooked with the reach, Rich Franklin might have the reach advantage with the punches. Did you say it was 4 inches, Jake?
7 inches actually.
7 inches.
Rich is at 76 inches, where Kung Lee is only at 69 inches.
Okay, so he's got the advantage with the punches, but I think it's fair to say that Kung Lee's strength isn't his punching, it's his kicking. And does he have the reach advantage when you put his kicks versus Rich Franklin's punches? And I don't think he does. So I think the reach, in a way, is a bit of a strange one here, because Kung Lee's not really a puncher, he's a kicker. But saying that, I still think Rich Franklin will win the fight. I think this is just like it's kind of like a novelty match. You've got two guys at the back end of their career. You've got a guy who was the middleweight champion for the UFC versus a guy who was a middleweight champion for Strikeforce. But yeah, for me, this is a Rich Franklin win. I think he fights at a high tempo. He'll get inside the kicks and he'll work Kung Lee. And I think in the later rounds, round 2 or round 3, I think he'll get the stoppage. Kung Lee has shown not so good cardio in some of his past fights. I mean, we saw it against Scott Smith at Strikeforce, and we saw it obviously against Vanderlei Silva. But in his last fight against Cote, his cardio did look good, and he won that fight. But I'm going to go towards Rich Franklin, round 2 or round 3 TKO.
I'm going to keep my breakdown simple with these guys. If it was, Rich Franklin of the past, the plodding, slow kind of a guy. I mean, yeah, he's effective, he's strategic, but his movement in his entire career kind of always looked off to me, awkward and strange and stiff. And it worked for him. I mean, he's fought some of the best out there: Okami, Henderson, Silva, Griffin, Vanderlei Silva, just all these guys out there. He's fought some of the best in the business. And in his last fight against Vanderlei Silva at UFC 147, something you guys didn't really bring up is the fact that his movement in that fight, he looked like a goddamn welterweight or a lightweight. He was springing around, using angles so effectively. He looked like an entirely different fighter. I thought that I was the only one that noticed that. Maybe I am, but he looked nothing like the Rich Franklin who had fought Forrest Griffin a year before that. So I really felt that I really feel that in this fight, we're going to see Kung Lee, look real good for the first round, and then Rich Franklin is just going to take over and win this fight by whatever he wants. It could be a submission, most likely not, probably TKO. I feel that Kung Lee has fought essentially no one good besides, Vanderlei Silva. His career is really, really padded.
Yeah, I definitely got to go with Rich Franklin here. I mean, on top of the fact that I just think he's a better fighter all around. Don't forget, too, that Kung Lee also had a movie come out this past weekend. So, he's been doing all tons of publicity and stuff for that. So how much is he really in his camp? How much involved was he for this fight? I'm sure he did have some serious training and stuff in there. But at the same time, his mind's not 100% into the fight because of this movie. Yeah, it's just a bad matchup for Kung. I was happy to see about a week ago he had already mentioned that this isn't his last fight. He still has, I believe, after this fight or with this fight, 3 fights left on his UFC contract. So, we'll still see him around. I just really don't see him getting the win here. I definitely, with you guys too, Franklin's definitely going to stop the fight. I would say midway through the second round.
Midway through the second round, I really like the specificity of a lot of the answers here, and we would talk a lot more, but unfortunately that is the last topic of the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, next week we start doing this on Thursdays. With the occasional exception, like I mentioned, Thanksgiving, we probably won't do a show that day. We might adjust to do a show on another day of that week. We'll figure it out and let you know through our Twitter feeds, so definitely follow us at MMA Mental, at the MMA Podcast. We thought about making a Twitter account just for just for the MMA Roundtable, but we figured it would get a little too tangled up at that point. So yeah, listen to us next week starting on Thursdays. I'll pass it off to Ray one more time to give shout outs for this week's episode of MMA Mental.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, just want to say it's really been a great show. We've really, speak for me and Patrick, we always enjoy this. We look forward to it every week. It's been brilliant again this week. So thank you to you three, and obviously thank you to Patrick. Okay, this week's guest, we've managed to line up 3 great guests. We've got War Machine, who's agreed to be on the show, which should be very interesting. He's always been quite controversial and quite outspoken. We've got Richard Hale coming off his come from behind victory over the weekend, and he's advanced to the Bellator heavyweight finals. And then Ryan Ford has just added me on Skype, which is absolutely always a bonus. So that's definitely on as well for Wednesday. He, again, also had a very solid performance And interestingly, him and War Machine have been going at it a little bit on Twitter, so it's quite interesting that I've managed to get both of them on the show as well. But look out for our fight diaries coming up. We've got Paul the Titan Taylor and Bama's Spencer Hewitt. They're coming up. They're going to do a series for me a week leading up to their fight, so look out for that. And MMA Mental have set up new forums, and it's free to register, so come and check us out.
Definitely, yeah. If you could get both of those guys on the horn at the same time, I don't know how easy it would be, but it would be really fun to hear them jawing back and forth. That would be really really fun. Probably pretty newsworthy.
Yeah, it would be pretty mad. I might message them and see what they say, see if they're up for it.
Definitely. And as far as the MMA podcast, we obviously go live every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We have, I'm sorry I forgot to mention it at the top of the podcast. I was kind of caught up in breaking down our interview with Michael Chiavello, the voice. But we have Pride, I don't know what to call her. She is, as Joe Rogan put it, the crazy Pride lady who would announce fighters whenever they walked out, like Wanderlei Silva. Really, really cool lady. I actually watched a couple interviews with her. We actually chatted politics on the DM on Twitter when I was riding the train home. I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, we have Lenny Hart coming on. She actually lives in Tokyo, so it's going to be 11 a.m. on Thursday when it's 8 p.m. on Wednesday for us. But I really can't wait to have her on. She says she tries to keep up with MMA, so I'll pick her brain a little bit on the current topics going on with mixed martial arts. I'm sure she has tons of stories from Pride. Really interested to hear that. Check out Ray on Twitter at MMA Mental, MMAmental.com. Our podcast is obviously at the MMA Podcast, at themmapodcast.com. Doesn't get much more simple than that. And until next Thursday, this is the MMA Roundtable. We gone.
Peace.
We gone.